Mr. Bob Harwood's #1. We gon' talk subprime, help you get them done. Come on.
Hey everybody, my name is Sean V. Bradley, president of Dealer Synergy and the creator of the Millionaire Car Salesman Group, and I'm really excited. Co-presenting with me is a very good friend of mine, VP of Sales of Interactive Financial, Mr. Bob Harwood. So Bob, I've known you, brother, since I was a manager back in the dealership, 25 years ago. It's crazy. Yeah. And you've been enveloped in special finance. Can you tell everybody just, the reason why I have you speaking with me is because Interactive Financial and yourself are truly subject matter experts for special finance. So can you share why you guys are so powerful and so experienced with bad credit, no credit, and subprime?
We have the best brand, right? We have carloan.com, and we got that just because we've been doing this longer than anyone else. So I know you know the history of our company, but just to give everybody a brief glimpse, we were founded in 1989 by actually our founder, Brooke Weissleader, owned a couple stores in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, and he bought 800 car loan for his stores. Travis, our owner, when he was in college, kind of realized this internet thing might get some legs. So he talked his dad into letting him get the URLs and build out the online. So we started generating leads online in 2000. So we've been doing it ever since. I've been here since '04. Came from the retail automotive and didn't do a ton of subprime at the store I was at. But when I came here, I realized subprime is just what I like. It's a different customer. The dealers that are really focused on it are a little different. It's just, to me, it's my people. So we've worked with, over the course of the 25 years that we've been doing this online, roughly 20,000 people we've trained on special finance process, just under 9,000 dealerships, generated 9.7 million applications that we've delivered to dealers. And based on our sell numbers, that's about 2.8 million cars we've been responsible for dealerships selling.
So long story short, you guys are legitimately subject matter experts for special finance, subprime, and deep subprime, correct?
We are. It's all we do. We try to be good at one thing.
So, and for everybody, this is the fundamentals. So it's going to build up, but let's start at the very fundamentals. So I would like you, Bob, can you just please define special finance, please? What is actually special finance?
So special finance is a catch-all term, as it says there, that really can include different things for different dealerships, but essentially it includes subprime, which is a defined term by the bureaus, which is the 619 to 540. Deep subprime, the below 540s, but also ghosts, the no credit files, people that have just filed a bankruptcy, ITINs, folks who don't have socials, all usually fall into that special finance bucket.
For deep subprime, just out of curiosity, what have you seen recently, like in the last, let's say for this year, for 2024, what's some of the lowest credit scores that you've seen approvals come through for? Like, can you see people getting approved on 420s, 450s, or correct?
I just heard last week, I was at a conference, 360 is the lowest one I've seen that actually got delivered.
360. Okay, 360. Perfect. Okay, so now what does special finance mean per Experian? Can you explain this slide?
Yeah, so according to Experian's numbers, which I think we can all agree are probably pretty close to accurate, 22% of U.S. consumers have a FICO score below 620, but that's people who do have a score. You add in another 12% that are just ghosts, don't have a file at all, or not deep enough to have a score, and you're looking at a third of the country that really fits into special finance.
Which is interesting because this is what I want to really take a couple of minutes on. As you know, I worked at Pine Belt. I worked for a Nissan, Kia, Cadillac dealership with one of the top special finance directors in the United States at the time, Bill Thompson. We were doing maybe 400 cars a month from Pine Belt, and approximately 25%, almost 100 units a month were subprime and deep subprime there. But it was interesting because I learned a lot from them. They actually had the special finance department out of Cadillac used cars. And I didn't understand that at first when I first got in it, because I always hear that these dealers don't want to have these credit criminals, these people that are urchins near their highline customers. They think that they're different people. And can you talk about this? Because I'm really passionate about trying to change the paradigm and the perception. We have right on this Zoom right now, we have two Lincoln dealers. Doral, she owns two Lincoln stores, which are Highline. They've got, 90,000 plus, SUVs, those Navigators. And you wouldn't normally think that special finance or subprime, or especially deep subprime, would be relevant for a Lincoln dealership. What's your opinion on that?
No, I think any dealership can do well with subprime if there's a top-down commitment that understands it is a profitable segment. We have some of our best dealers are Highline, Lexus, BMW, Mercedes dealers. and what they do in order to make it work for them, because they don't want to be known in the market as, hey, come to Bradley Mercedes, your job is your credit. That doesn't really work, for a Mercedes store. So they can use a company like ours that does third-party leads to generate the traffic. Their name's never attached to it. So all you got to do is buy a little separate inventory, have a couple folks in the store that understand how to work with those customers. And, the reality is a lot of the subprime folks are really driven by brand, and there's some ego involved. So if they can go home with, whatever BMW on the back of their car, as opposed to, Joe's dirt lot, that matters. People are very proud to have that on the back of their car.
Let me build on that, Bob, because when I worked at Pine Belt, exactly what we did, you hit it spot on. When I worked at Pine Belt didn't want, for the Cadillac customers to have that reputation of, hey, bad credit, no credit, come on down, right? So what they did was I actually created a pseudonym. I still own this URL to today, auto credit approved. So you remember that, Bob? At Pine Belt, it was Pine Belt Cadillac, but again, what we did is we created a website, autocreditapproved.com. We just had Maroni labels built out printed out for the cars that booked out the best. So they had a special section of the lot that was segregated from the rest of the dealership. We had the branding, the agents that we had polos that said auto credit approved. We also had who's calling back in the day for call whispering. So we knew when somebody was calling off of it, it would whisper, it would say auto credit approved. So we'd answer the phone. Thank you for calling auto credit approved. Are you calling about getting your credit approved? Or whatever the word track was back then. But we had that pseudonym that did not tarnish the brand equity that we built in as a Highline store. So Bob, you just said something too, that, some of your top clients are Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, which is counterintuitive. And I just want to say this, if you think about this, guys, think of how many times we've all heard of like rappers or rich people win the lottery that go broke, they go bankrupt. Rich people get divorced a lot. Bill Gates, you know what I mean? Tiger Woods, you know what I'm saying? These rich people have habits, drug habits, whatever they might be. These rich people get sick. Rich people make stupid investments. Rich people get, caught up in COVID and everything else. So my point is, bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to everybody, right? So don't just alienate your potential audience because you're not, you don't want those type of people. Because the good news is that people that have high income or high net worth could afford the bank fees. They could afford the down payment. So Bob, can you talk about that for a second? Like how beneficial it is to have a special finance audience that's not just street urchins that don't pay their bills. They're people that have money that just have effed up credit.
Yeah, I was actually curious. You and I were talking, I think it was at your conference. We were talking about how there are parts of the country feel like, oh, we don't do special finance because our average income is high and we don't have that here. I was just curious when I got back and I looked at the top 10 zip codes in the country for the highest income per capita. 7 of those 10, we physically have a dealership doing subprime in. And the reality is if you make 20 grand a month, but you spend 30 grand a month, you're going to end up as a special finance customer with a nice down payment, right?
Absolutely. All right. So now, again, special finance does not mean credit criminals. Explain.
Well, I think people go through a lot of things in their lives. So you said people go through divorce, medical stuff. We had a spike in folks who were trying to recover from COVID. Their businesses closed. They lost a spouse. They had something terrible happen in their lives that not only is very sad, but it put them financially in a bad spot. So we have some dealers that really did understand that and now have built customers for lives, because the reality, customers that are special finance tend to be very, very loyal because they know their credit's damaged. They're embarrassed. They're scared of this whole process. So if they find a dealership that treats them respectfully, puts them in a car that fits their family's needs and budget without making 10 grand on that deal, you've got a customer for life. And not just that customer, you have their friends, you have their children. Understanding how to connect with special finance customers, and the key is really just treating them like you do any other customer with respect, builds a network that grows more quickly than you would believe.
And the next thing I'm going to go into here is, it's a rhetorical question first, because I want to frame this. Why should you proactively solicit special finance business? See, a lot of people react to subprime. I'll give you an example. Nashville, I think, I don't know if it's literally, but I think it's the bankruptcy capital of the United States. I mean, there's so much subprime and deep subprime in Nashville and the surrounding areas like Murfreesboro, Tennessee, et cetera. And so I get it. If you're in an area that is poverty stricken or it's susceptible to bad credit, no credit, you don't have to do much except just answer the phone or answer your emails or answer the front door, and whoever walks in, your ups, have bad credit. But that's reacting to your current market. What we're saying right here, and I want you to answer this question, is why should people proactively solicit business? Whether your local area has bad credit or not, why do you feel that we should additionally, instead of just reacting to special finance, we should be proactively, trying to solicit that business? Explain that to me.
Actually, a great question. I think there's a couple answers. The one that comes to mind first is in every town, no matter where you live, if people have bad credit, there's a couple dealerships that come to mind automatically, right? Whether it's some national things like a JD Byrider or a Drive Time or the local folks that are doing your job as your credit ads. So if you're not proactively soliciting the business and it's something you want to do, you're just not going to get those folks as walk-ins because they're not thinking of your store. They're thinking of the ones that are aggressively, loudly advertising for that business. But I think even more importantly is if you're just counting on whatever walks in the door, then you are going to deal with a disproportionate number of credit criminals. Whereas if you're using a company, like you're driving leads like a company like mine, you're doing mail through someone else, however you're going to drive traffic through a marketing source, there's a level of filtration that takes place. So of the leads that we generate where someone fills out an entire credit app, hits submit, we only send about 30% to a dealership because the rest of them fail a filter somewhere. They don't make enough income, their phone number is no good, whatever that may be. I think there's an element of respecting your staff's time and understanding the value of that time. So yeah, you could just let everybody walk in, but you're going to be sorting through a lot to find the gold. Whereas if you partner with somebody who is experienced on the marketing side of it, a lot of that filtering can be done prior to, and you're just dealing with the ones who have a need and have the ability to buy something.
This is crazy right here. I'm looking at your slide. Like, one publicly traded subprime focused used car group reported an average gross of $6,835 per vehicle in Q3 2023. And look, I don't care if the market is shifting and that number, dropped down to, $5,000, or 5,800 or whatever it is. We're talking about massive amount of money here. And let's talk about this because we have franchise dealers that are on this webinar right now. The reality is we're almost done with the first half of 2024. We're going into the last month of the first half for this year, right? So half the year is almost gone. And the market has changed significantly. There's more new cars that are being produced, Bob. That means that the manufacturers are putting incentives. There's rebates. There's actually some manufacturers have 0% on select models. There's people that are already racing to the bottom and discounting, where you don't have that situation as much with subprime because these people don't have as many options. Interest rate is higher. We'll get into the different, ways that you can make profit with a special finance customer, but grosses are one of the main reasons. I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. Special finance business, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of details, and sometimes it can be a pain in the neck, but the money that you make from it is massively worth it. Would you agree?
Well, I do. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing subprime and making it a real initiative in the store. Higher profits is obviously one. And I think we've got a slide coming up that talks about floor plan, but we've been talking about this a lot lately, that we knew as an industry that manufacturers are still making cars and those, the chip shortage. So those cars are sitting in parking lot. Well, they're not anymore. And they're going to continue to send these things to dealerships. And it's awful tough for a dealership to figure out how to move all these new cars that they don't necessarily want, didn't order, but they're going to get. So our customers are great because they'll take the model that maybe isn't quite as appealing to someone with an 800 credit score. We can get old age, whether it's new or used, we can get the old age units off of the floor plan. We can get those out on start getting the service revenue that we going to come with, especially a new car or warranty work. So there's a lot that we don't think about. We're looking at the front end gross, the back end gross, and that's where people stop thinking about the profitability of a subprime customer. But I think they add a lot more than that.
So basically what you're saying is that, and we skipped a slide on purpose because you went right to floor plan, but that's absolutely brilliant. Again, floor plans are more expensive, 7 to 9% which is crazy, especially when you start getting into expensive vehicles like those Lincolns or those BMWs or those Highline cars that you were mentioning before. It could get stupid. So utilizing a special finance strategy, maybe not deep subprime, but subprime, to be able to unload aged units or less desirable models, or vehicles with certain packages, etc. Cody's in California, and they got all these wacky packages out there for the LA market. Now let's go back to the other one right here, is increase F&I penetration. Special finance customers tend to be payment driven. Generally, they're open to warranty gap etch as long as the monthly payment fits their budget. I'm going to tell you, we talked about this before when we were prepping for this. And I have an independent special finance dealer, Easy Auto, that's on here. When I was a special finance manager, we didn't have a bad credit prospect or a bad credit app and say, oh, go show them a vehicle, see what they like, and then work the deal. That's absurd to me. With special finance, I would reverse engineer the deal. We would basically identify, which of the lenders is the best suited for this particular subprime prospect, based on, like you were talking about, the situation. Based on what their credit situations, why, etc., we would find the best lender. And then we would cross-reference our inventory. I would always look for which piece of inventory do I have in stock that I could max payment on, that I could max gross profit. And there isn't a ton of front-end profit in these deals, especially with these bank fees and stuff. Can you talk about that, Bob, and why a lot of these deals we spoke about before are back-end heavy? Can you talk about that?
The Millionaire Car Salesman podcast is on your radio. Before we go any further, Anthony, can you tell them why you like using Bradley On Demand?
The format that you have it at, where I was like, man, do I got to sit down for like 45 minutes to do this? No, I could sit down and it's like a 5-minute video or a 2-minute video. It's like topic addressed. And something freaky's been happening the last couple of days, because one of my managers is super interested in it. Me and him will get together and talk about certain things that I want to work on. And then I'm like, I leave that conversation, I start doing some video training, and literally the that I clicked on is the stuff that we were talking about in the conversation. I'm like, dude, I go back at the end of the day, I'm like, you're not going to believe this, but everything that we were talking about this morning, I just learned in the video again. And it's not because I'm a green pea, but it's what I want to know is I want to refresh and be able to 'cause sometimes you forget things.
Listen, if you don't have access to Bradley On Demand, you're missing out on crucial information. The top automotive groups like Coons, Lithia, and Norm Reeves have all used Bradley On Demand to train their teams. And guess what? The world's #1 car salesman, Cody Carter, shares his exclusive strategies right here. You want his secrets? You gotta have Bradley On Demand. Stop waiting and start winning. Dominate your market. Click the link and get access now.
Yeah, I think it is tougher to make a lot of gross on the front end because of the bank fees specifically, right? So if you're doing a deep subprime deal, it's probably be a couple $1,000s in fees that the bank needs to charge in order just to mitigate their risk. But and there's a dealer that you and I both know that in Arizona who, for I think 2 years running, led the country in new Focuses sold, and he very openly will say he gave them away. He was losing $2-3 grand on the front end of every car. He didn't care because he was averaging, I think he said 62 or something like that on the back, plus getting stair-step money for Ford for selling all these Focuses, right? So I think if you're focusing on subprime, you need to somewhat shift your focus on where in the deal you're making the money and just make sure that you are making the money. So giving it away on the front to make a ton on the back, still the same money, right? We're still cashing the same check. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, exceptionally well. That was a perfect answer. Okay, so now the keys to special finance success. I believe that there are 6 main keys or little success variables, right? Inventory, banks, lenders, leads, opportunities, ups, people, process, and CRM strategy. So I want to kind of break this down with people that want to do special finance. They hear people like Bob or me talk about this, but their inventory is whacked. They don't have cars that book out, which means if they don't have cars that book out, they're not going to be able to get funding or make any money on it. So Bob, can you explain what that means? Let's do that term right there. What does, book out mean, and why is that relevant to a special finance strategy to have the proper inventory?
Right. So special finance lenders, well, all lenders, but as it relates to this conversation, special finance lenders are going to give an advance. They're going to give an approval based on a percentage of the vehicle's value, whether that's blue book or black book. I think it depends on where you are in the country or the lender, but it's going to be, 80%, 90%, 120% of that book value, right? So what's been a challenge for dealerships for the last year and a half is the used car market was so hot that everybody was finding at the auction that they're basically paying retail to try and get these cars. And the cars didn't fit very well into subprime deals for that reason. And now we needed an increased down payment to make the deals work. But what we're seeing now is I'm talking to dealers, and Lincoln dealer is a great example, because I can almost guarantee without knowing anything about the store that if they bring in a car that, is a $10,000 car, that thing's going to Manheim before anybody looks at it, right? They're getting it out of here because that's not a retail car that fits their customer base. But if you keep that car, put it through the shop, maybe you got a couple grand shop bill, so you got say 12, 13 grand in the car, and you can sell that one for 20. Well, now we've got some room to eat a bank fee. We can make some profit or have some room to negotiate with the customer and still have the room for our back end profit.
Or handle the out of equity that they might be,
Or
trying to
eat up
get
negative equity, right? Because, and that is a
100%.
big part of, subprime is often when folks buy a car and they're subprime, they run into a dealership that's just looking at, I want to make as much as I can now on this deal, which I have no value judgment on that. Different dealerships work different ways. It's not the way I've done business because I want customers for long term. But we're running into people that, they just crushed them. They made a $10,000 gross on them, and that person's buried in that car till the day they make the last payment. So yes, if we have some room in the car we're selling, now we can eat up some negative equity.
Vehicles that retail for $25,000 or less. Explain to me the slide.
Well, we want to be able to keep a payment roughly around $500 a month. That just tends to be what's a comfort level for the majority of subprime folks. Now, as we said, if you're making 15 grand a month, then probably you're not as worried about it. But your average blue collar worker that's making, 5 grand a month. So by the time we do all the payment to income calculations and all that, we usually want to be around 500 a month. And $25,000 car usually gets us in the ballpark, depending on down payment and other stuff like that. But once we get too far above that number, now we're just pricing some customers out where, there's a car they'd love to have, but a $600-700 payment just isn't going to work for a lot of these folks. And another thing with these particular customers is they tend to have a shorter sales cycle because it tends to be a need-based purchase, right? So it's not somebody that's kicking tires and looking around. Like, they're coming in because the minivan's dying and they need to get something today. So if we can't make the deal work today because we don't have the vehicle in stock, it's awful tough to go chase one down while they're waiting. So, if we can have the inventory that fits kind of the majority of those customers on the lot, it tends to speed up and get those deals so they're not going somewhere else.
Yeah, on a trainer perspective, I want to touch on what you just said, because that's something that's noteworthy for our audience here, is that I've worked with a gentleman that Bob and I both respect named Greg Goebel. He's like the godfather of special finance in the industry. He's actually a forensic expert witness for the government. I mean, it's crazy, like, all about, finance and special finance and stuff like that. The guy is brilliant. He's former dealer principal, and I've co-presented with him at the special finance conferences back in the day. And what's interesting is there's a formula, approximately like 10%. If you had a special finance department, you wanted to sell 50 cars, you're going to need about 500 special finance credit apps. However, the difference is that we're a new car franchise, especially like a Highline franchise. You're looking at 90 to 150 days is the average buying cycle, because they're more expensive than ever, because there's less new vehicles being produced because of the factory direct orders. I had a situation where I had put a factory direct order on a $90,000 SUV, and we had to let it go because it kept on getting pushed back. So my point being, it's not that people are just trying to be difficult. It is just the new car market. But Bob, you nailed it. One of the other benefits for special finance, it's not instant gratification, but it's more faster gratification than a traditional internet opportunity. I'm going to repeat that, where you're going to have mid to long-term follow-up to truly maximize internet sales or BDC. A special finance opportunity and a special finance department set up the right way has a faster turn, faster closing cycle. Correct, Bob?
Very correct.
Inventory. What about the people that don't have cars that book out? What if they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. They're on this webinar, they're loving it, but they look at their inventory and it's like, womp womp. We don't have the right inventory. What can they do? What advice do you have for them to be able to get those type of vehicles that book out the best for special finance?
First and foremost is work with the used car manager to keep some of the trades, right? Because it really has gotten to where a lot of dealerships, they get a trade and they just want it out. And I get why, especially at a Highline store, your Mercedes store, and you bring in a 6-year-old Explorer, it's just not a fit for your normal inventory. But for special finance, that's a golden car, right? So I think it's working with management to say, hey, this is something we want to do in the store. These are the potentials. Here's what we need. And it's really not a lot that you need, right? Because you're going to end up keeping a car, you're going to have it gone before it's ever going to hit floor plan, or you're going to end up taking it to auction anyway. So there's really no risk in that approach for the dealership, because worst case, they kept the car a month longer than they would have, and they're still going to end up taking it to the auction. But if we have a chance to retail that and make significantly more money than we would have at auction, it just seems logical. Buying inventory for special finance at auctions is a challenge. It genuinely is pretty tough because everybody's fighting over the same cars. But some of our dealers we're talking to recently are really aggressively circling back on the buying. We want to buy your car, even if you don't buy one from us. And it seems like a lot of dealers went hard at that for a little while, and then it's kind of pulled back. So some of our better dealers are out in the community saying, hey, if you don't buy a car, great, we want yours. And that's really become their main source of finding cars that fit some of these subprime customers.
Well, I was going to just say too, though, Bob, because we have people that are special finance dealerships or independent dealerships on this call, on this webinar, and they're like, well, we don't have good trades. I mean, like almost everything they trade is a sled, or it's broken down because they are a special finance dealership. But like you said, I agree with you on the new car side of things. But let's say you're an independent dealership or a special finance store, and the vast majority of trades, if there are any, are not worthy of or not possible to retail. So where can they go, or how can they have an acquisition strategy to be able to get the proper inventory that books out so they could start to build their special finance business?
I spend a lot of time talking about direct mail and how I don't think it's a great tool for what we do as far as generating subprime traffic. But for something like what you're talking about is, hey, we want to buy cars. The direct mail piece is actually what I've seen works really well, because you can find people, it's so detailed what they can get you as far as data now. You can find people in an equity position in a car that fits the box that you're looking for, and you're only basically mailing to those people saying, hey, we want to buy your car. And so, you get a 1% response on a 10,000 piece mailer. Okay. Well, now you got 100 people that you're talking to, and maybe, 10 of them you end up doing a deal. Now you got 10 cars in your inventory you didn't have that fit what you're looking for.
Absolutely. We have a couple questions. The question is, and I quote, so you get people approved, or do you send them to the dealership after getting the information? Okay. I'm going to give you my opinion.
Oh, I love this question. Yes.
So love it. Yeah. So I'll go first, and then I'm going to ask Bob. We're both experts on different sides of the fence here, right? So I prefer to bring them in. Okay. I prefer to bring them in, and here's why. In jiu-jitsu, in UFC, in wrestling, there is a phrase, it rhymes. It is position before submission. What that means is, before you go for the finish, before you go for the submission, you want to get in the best tactical position for a myriad of reasons. So I'm going to tell you this right here, right now, as a trainer, you have the highest probability of closing a deal if you have a prospect in your showroom. I can't tell you how many times when I worked at Pine Belt, when somebody was in the dealership already, we were able to find a co, or find another co, or find another co, or was able to get an extra nickel or an extra G down payment, or what have you. It is a lot easier on the phone or the text or the internet to say, no, I can't, or just like give you a counterfeit yes, like, yeah, I'm coming in, and don't show up. So strategically speaking, you have the highest probability in front of you at the dealership. So again, I would say first, if at all possible, set the appointment. Now, there's actually legal reasons as well. You can't really legally say that you're approved or not approved without full disclosure. And again, if you want to get into all of that over the phone or email or text message, God bless you, but it's a pain in the ass. Now, there are people that won't do that. There are people that you could possibly put a special finance deal together, but they want you to work the deal. So I'm a car guy. My thing is this: if I had my way, I want them in my house where I have higher control and a higher probability of a conversion. However, that doesn't mean that I'm going to turn around and blow a deal or disengage a potential sale because I've got my pride or my priorities. So I would be willing to do business in certain circumstances. For example, also, I'm a human being. I'm not going to drag somebody in an hour and a half away and we're not sure. So there are some conditions. So Bob, what is your opinion on that question?
Yeah, I thought this was going to be our first thing we could debate, but we actually agree. So that's less fun. But I think anyone who's trying to do special finance without trying to get everyone in the door is not only doing themselves a disservice, they're working actively against themselves. So for a few reasons, and I tell a story a lot, and obviously my company, we do online leads, right? So people don't come to us. We don't get a customer typically, because you're not going to Google trying to figure out how to finance a car until you've gone somewhere and gotten your feelings hurt, right? So a lot of our customers have walked into the wrong store that doesn't do special finance and basically got broomed out. So they're not going to get embarrassed again. So they fill out the application and they're essentially terrified. If you think about buying a car is really scary. Doing a major transaction online or remotely is really scary. And we're combining all that into one thing. And I think everyone wakes up when they're going to buy a car with a car in mind. So the fact that, like with my company, we don't ask a consumer what kind of car they're interested in, because honestly, I know they're not going to probably end up in that car anyway. It just confuses the issue. So we don't ask them. We're just looking for the credit application. But as soon as I send them to whatever store and that store says you're approved, well, now we just grew credit muscles, right? Because that person hears I'm approved everywhere. So now I don't need to come see you. I can go wherever I want. The other thing that's a big issue, and I'm frequently amazed how many dealerships aren't really familiar with what they are or how they work. But, I have people who've been doing subprime for 30, 40 years say, hey, I can look at a bureau and I can tell you what the deal is, where I'm going to send it, what they're approved for. And some people are really skilled and I know can do that. But what they don't know is the reality is once you pull a bureau, the next day, the bureaus are selling that customer that you have, that's yours, you've worked hard to nurture it. And now you're handing it to 3 or 4 other dealerships in your market as a trigger. That's basically saying, hey, this person's in the market to buy a car, call them. So those are, to me, the 2 biggest reasons that we want to get everybody in the store. That aside, I have never gotten a big down payment or co-signer from anyone talking to them on the phone. But if I can get them in the store, get them in a car, have them take mental ownership of the car, picture it in their driveway, now they're remembering that, maybe grandma will sign. Maybe I've got, a couple $100 I can get from my dad, something like that. That I don't have the skills to do that over the phone, and anyone who does is pretty incredible.
Brother, I agree. We're on the same page here.
Millionaire Car Salesman Podcast is on your radio. Okay, give me your favorite Bradley On Demand feature.
I could pull this shit up on my phone. Like if I'm out on the lot and I could just click, watch a 5-minute video right before an appointment. But everything that's on it, it's great. And then the thing that's exciting is like, it's not just Sean, LA, Karen. It's like you have guest speakers on it as well. And it's cool because like you see everybody's different technique. And then I love how like sometimes you pop in right after one of those videos and you're like, let me tell you my technique real quick. And I'm like, okay, like this is cool. This is cool. Like, here's one way to do it. And I would always tell people, I'm like, there's not one way to cut a pizza. Like
right. Yeah.
You get one pizza, they got slices, and then you get a flatbread or like thin crust pizza that comes in the squares. I remember the first time I got that, I was like, this doesn't make sense.
Listen, if you don't have access to Bradley On Demand, you're missing out on crucial information. The top automotive groups like Coons, Lithia, and Norm Reeves have all used Bradley On Demand to train their teams. And guess what? The world's #1 car salesman, Cody Carter, shares his exclusive strategies right here. You want his secrets? You gotta have Bradley On Demand. Stop waiting and start winning. Dominate your market. Click the link and get access now.
Next, banks, lenders. I would definitely love to hear from Cody Carter in a second here on this one. But again, you could have all the inventory that books out whatever, you need to theoretically sell the deal. But if you don't have funding, where are you going? I mean, you can't drive without gas in the tank. So there's a broad range of lending options from, so explain these things right here.
Well, everyone on the call, I assume, is familiar at least with the names of most of the banks on this list. So we've got banks that are more full spectrum. A Capital One's a great example. That's where I started, actually. The auto finance side of things was at Capital One. And when I was there, it was 2001, maybe. So it was right when they bought Summit Auto Finance to create Capital One Auto Finance. And what they did then is they only worked with subprime. And now, though, they've grown out to, if you are at 800 credit score, Capital One's competitive in that. So really, any credit score fits for Capital One. Santander kind of similar. Your deep subprime banks, everybody's, I assume, familiar with CAC, Exeter, Westlake. The biggest complaint I hear about any of those banks is they do have some pretty aggressive fees, but because they're buying a customer that is also much more likely to charge off and cost them money. So those fees really are kind of cost of doing business. And then you got the niche ones. And this is where I think I've seen a kind of a generation in the business that hasn't really understood the niches as well as it seems like the previous generation. So if you have a BK, Tidewater does an open 7 pre-341 meeting. So they haven't even been to the meeting of creditors yet. You can put them in a car and it's no recourse, meaning if they include that car for some reason in the BK, Tidewater takes the hit, not the dealership. So you're ahead of every other dealer in the market if you understand Tidewater's program, because there are people that are really focusing hard on especially the open 7s. Prestige is really good for that. ITINs, we're doing a lot now with Spanish speaking leads, and we're finding that the dealerships who do the best with it are the folks who understand in their market, who can work with folks without a social, that have an ITIN that aren't really fits for traditional financing, but there are absolutely banks that want that customer.
I love this. Cody, do you have any banks that you use that are really good for special finance?
So, primarily what I do is lease, right? So, and I deal primarily in prime or ultra prime, 730 plus scores. So I don't do as much in subprime, but the one that we do use that's pretty interesting, and this is just a story from yesterday. I use Ally for leasing, and their specialty is they're not score driven. It's the ability to buy. Their matrix is a lot different. So we had a customer yesterday, 630 score, doesn't fit my normal credit union program, and Ally gave them tier 1, right? So it made us be able to make the deal. We made good money. It's a RAV prime. So, but 630 score and being able to tell them that they got tier 1, they think we did them a huge favor. And like you said, you earn them for life.
No, I love it. So again, what I'm getting out of this is that you need to have a diversified banks and lenders. They're not all created equal. And one of the problems I see, and Cody, we've talked about this before, and one of the reasons why you're so successful compared to full-blown Toyota dealerships as a salesperson is because a lot of new car franchises, they seem to be stuck on their OEM financing for whatever reason. And in special finance, if you don't have a good diversity of your banks and lenders, and you don't have good relationships with them, you're not going to do out special finance. Correct, Bob?
Very correct. And I think it's really is understanding the program. So especially with those deep subprime banks we have listed here, CAC, Exeter, Westlake, like there is a way to structure the deals that makes sense for each one of those banks. And if you don't understand how they want the deal and how it best performs and gets the best approval, it's awful tough. So I talk to a lot of finance people that essentially are going through dealer track, clicking a bunch of banks that they think do some subprime, sending it and just seeing what comes back. And the shotgunning it, I guess, works to some extent. But if you understand, and the credit unions especially, and I think Cody just said, if you have a local credit union that has a box and you understand that box, now you can get deals done that maybe other folks aren't, because they don't understand when to send it or how to set it up to make it work for that bank.
Yes,
yeah.
I love it.
And also, I'm going to chime in too. So Sean had mentioned like how a lot of the dealers here stick with their OEM, their captive financing. And it's interesting, like even within our store, besides me, we typically send everything to Toyota Financial. And we see some of that with the I-10 customers. Toyota is extremely difficult on them. One, with all the stipulations that they require, but also some of these customers in the past have used socials that weren't theirs. And Toyota ties those together and just absolutely kills the deal. They're not interested at all ever moving forward. So a lot of times those deals that they rolled at our store, then they find out later, like, oh, we're screwed. They'll pass those deals over to me, and then we send it to my credit union that does I-10, and they do leasing too. So we can capture it on lease or purchase. We're not without an option.
That's crazy.
Well, and the captive lenders aren't necessarily always. So last year, Chrysler Capital for a little while had special rebate if you finance through them for anybody 620 and below, right? If they bought a new Chrysler. So the OEMs actually do chase that business. It's just, you got to time it right.
Special finance deals can be more complicated due to customers not fully understanding their situation and options, banks' requirements, etc. The team working with those customers in the dealership should be properly trained on how, where the conversations with special finance customers will deviate from the norm, how to answer typical questions, and overcome subprime specific objections. Let me be clear on this, because me and Bob, we were talking about this before. And when I came up in the industry in the late 90s, I know I'm old, right? We used to have special finance departments, and they weren't mixed with the BDC. We had a special finance director, and in that department of the special finance director, we had special finance coordinators or special finance appointment setters. And these people did not handle anything else. They weren't doing unsold showroom traffic. They weren't doing internet deals. They weren't doing phone ups. They were only, unless they were special finance phone ups. And why? Because they're special. There is a major difference between a new car sale, a used car sale, and a special finance sale. The biggest difference with special finance, it's not about the car. I don't care how important the car might feel or think to the prospect. It's about the approval first. It's approval first, car second. And so what you need to do is have a person or a department that is solely dedicated to the art of credit, of special finance, their verbiage, their lingo, their jargon, everything that they do, from their voicemail messages to their phone scripts to their qualifying questions to their qualifying sheet, needs to be geared and customized for the special finance environment. Bob, can you please elaborate on what I'm saying? Because I know that we're both passionate about this.
I am. So yeah, I think the advent of BDC really made subprime a lot harder because it happened really quickly that dealerships put all leads in one bucket and said, okay, if it's a lead, no matter where it comes from, what kind of lead it is, it goes to BDC. So I've found as we run across BDCs that are good, they have typically a process that's built around their new car or their inventory-based leads, because that's the majority of what they're getting. So I joked with Sean the other day, but this is true. I see emails out of dealers' CRMs to leads we've sent that says, hey, we see that you're interested in the NA that we have. We'd love to talk to you about it. It's not a great way to start a conversation trying to sell somebody.
Let me translate. What Bob is saying is that the CRM merge codes or the CRM macros, they're called, they're not pulling because there's all this automation, there's all this AI now, there's all this, form content. And if somebody is a credit prospect or it's a credit app or it's a special finance app, etc., they're not on a particular vehicle. So again, how disingenuous, how ridiculous does that seem? That I'm spending this time, I'm emotionally stressed out, I need a vehicle, and then I get this half-ass broken email that doesn't even make any sense. It's not relevant to me. So it's not just the person, it's the technology that goes around it. But Bob, continue.
Yeah. So when I started in the business, most stores we worked with had a special finance department, as you said. And that was typically, at least three people. You had one person hanging the paper who worked with the banks, understood the programs. You had one just pounding the phone that understood how to talk to special finance customers. And then one that was, showing the cars and selling the cars. And that can all be now combined, I think, into one, maybe two people. And it can be in BDC or without. But if it's in BDC, we just need to almost break out a separate person that is focused on those subprime customers, because it's just not fair to have a BDC agent who, call comes in and it's a new car, and then the next one's, somebody on a service reminder, and then it's a special finance customer, and then it's another new car. And those are all different conversations, and asking somebody to shift gears every conversation, while I'm sure people can do it, I don't know that you can be nearly as effective as if you're focused on a specific segment of what you're trying to accomplish. So for my folks, subprime is where we live. So we'd love to have someone in F&I who may not only do special finance deals, but in the store, he's the only one who does, or she is the only one who does the special finance deals, so that they have time to understand the banks, make the relationships with the banks, do all those kinds of things.
Let me jump in on this, okay? I want to take it even deeper. Perception is reality. When I go into the bank, my banker sounds like he knows what he's talking about, or she sounds like she knows what she's talking about. She doesn't sound like a freaking random appointment setter that has no idea about my financial information. So I firmly believe that if you are going to be engaged in special finance, now again, I'm talking about being proactive. If you're just reacting and you're just playing in the space, do what you want to do and you get the results you're going to get. But if you want to be serious about maximizing the massive amount of profit in this thing, I am telling you, if you had a special finance manager or special finance director, if you had special finance coordinators or special finance appointment setters, and they understood credit, they understood the credit application, they understood the stip sheets, they understood the jargon, they understood all the aspects of this, they would have more confidence. They would have more credibility. They're going to have more engagements, more conversions, and you're going to be more successful because you're specializing. Instead of being a jack of all trades, you're going to be a special finance specialist. Process and CRM strategy. Dealerships should have a defined process outlining each stage of the sales process. It is significantly different for folks where financing will be prioritized over the specific vehicle. 50% of special finance buyers end up purchasing 30 to 90 days from the time that they first start looking. The process built into the CRM should reflect this and ensure that the dealerships stay more aggressively in front of these customers for longer than more traditional prospects. So let me just jump in this, okay? So building on what we just said about the people, you need to have a special finance process. I've been beating this freaking subject more than I could care to admit, because I have a lot of clients that hire us to set up the CRM. And especially when they do special finance, but their website doesn't have a button that says bad credit, no credit. So let's think of this logically, guys. If all you have is, a soft credit pull API, or you just have a credit application or get approved or financing, you can't assume that those people have bad credit. You have to assume they either have good credit or you're not sure of the credit. So you have to be neutral with your verbiage, with your templates, email templates, text message templates. They've got to be professionally neutral. However, if you had a button on your website that said bad credit, no credit, click here, or if you're buying carloan.com special finance leads and you know it's special finance, you could create a unique special finance experience through email templates, phone scripts, voicemail scripts, qualifying sheets, needs assessments, special finance objections and rebuttals. So you could fit hand in glove this information. You could customize the automation. You could customize the AI for that special finance experience. Again, the other thing that I really like what Bob also said is the gestation period, the shopping and buying cycle is much shorter. So you don't want to waste time. You don't want to waste your human resources spinning wheels. So if you properly set up the gestation period, it'll be a lot faster. So I love that. Leads and opportunities. I'm gonna turn this over to Bob because that's what he specializes in. So explain, you need opportunities to do business. What if we're hitting a point of diminishing return? We don't have enough special finance leads or special finance ups, for our general market. Or if we have, but we just want more. We want more money, man. We want more opportunities. Give us some ideas on what's the most successful and cost-effective ways to generate special finance traffic, Bob.
Well, I think it depends on the store and what the goals are. So these first ones we have here, TV, radio, direct mail, are more of a high volume, almost, it's the shotgun approach, right? So if you have the bandwidth to have a lot of folks come into the store, a majority or a lot of which won't be able to buy something, and you can sort through them, then especially radio, I think we've all found that it drives a lot of subprime traffic, whether it's the local country channel or the local urban channel. They both seem to do really, really well. You have a live show, have hot dogs, they get the kids out there with balloons, and subprime people will come in. To me, when I was on retail, what's frustrating about that is there is a lot of sorting through. So also, if you're worried about your brand, so if you're locally the store that's, hey, your job is your credit, then by all means, get on radio and blast it to the hills, right? Let everybody know that's where you should come if you have bad credit. Direct mail, again, I think it's awful tough to get the proper return on direct mail to subprime. As I was talking to somebody recently, Capital One's the gold standard of subprime mailers. And if you're killing it with those guys, you're still paying $100 per opportunity. So to me, you have to close really well to make that work. But I think a blast mailer, again, if you're just looking for a lot of traffic in a really tight amount of time, you send out however you want to do inventory reduction sale, send it to 100,000 people for 30 cents a piece, and have a lot of traffic come in and sort them out. It's absolutely a good strategy if you have the bandwidth and the brand to do that. If not, and I think the next slide will kind of highlight that if you don't want to have your brand be necessarily always associated in people's minds with the Brad Credit store is more where a company like mine or one of my competitors makes more sense, where we can do all the online advertising using our brand. So for us, it's all wrapped around carloan.com. At no time are we mentioning the name of the dealer before, during, or after the person has applied, because to us, the brand doesn't matter. And what we find is, yes, everybody wakes up in the morning and has a car in mind. So if Cody's at a Toyota store and our hypothetical special finance customer wants a Honda, they're not going to engage with Cody long enough to find out he can get them any car that fits their family's needs and budget. They're going to see Toyota and they're going to move on. Whereas in kind of an agnostic world where they're seeing everything under the marketing company's brand, we're not talking about any brand. So we're delivering a customer that is essentially at that point not tied to any specific car and is raising their hand saying, hey, I just need some help with the financing, and then we'll worry about the car.
I love it. So we have a question really quick, and I want to try to answer them. So somebody just asked in here in the group, how do you access the best finance manager assistant? We've been trying to find one for almost a year. Again, I'll take that one. We are a recruiting staffing agency, guys. Deal with Synergy has successfully hired almost 39,000 automotive professionals, managers, etc. So it's like anything else. You have to first start with a profile, reverse engineer what you're looking for. There's a difference between a finance manager or finance assistant versus a special finance manager versus a special finance assistant. What are they going to do? There's a difference of somebody that's running a special finance department like a BDC manager versus somebody that's on the back end that is going to be, spinning the paper, dealing with funding and back end products and things like that. So you have to develop a profile, what exactly you're looking for. Once you've got that profile, you have to have the right pay plan and the right comp package. And then it is a myriad of recruiting using sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, social media, your database, networking, and there's a lot more. I want to ask Cody, because Cody is God, he's one of the absolute friggin' best people, better than finance managers I've seen in the United States. Cody, do you have any advice on how, whether it's Arthur or anybody else, could proactively engage? Like, do you just pick up the phone and call credit union? Like, all bullshit aside, like, what can they do to start to develop relationships with credit unions and like local lending institutions?
I've done a little bit of everything because, it comes to a certain capacity that they reach out to you, right? And that's been some of my things where they've reached out and like, hey, we want to do business with you. We want to see how things would work. A lot of times it's picking up the phone and calling and trying to get the right person. Some of it's just doing the research online. That's how I've gotten a lot of it. A lot of these, I'm big on Facebook pages and online forums, and that's where I've run across, a lot of the banks that I want to work with, and actually found a lot of those reps to get like their phone numbers online and been able to reach out to them directly. I don't think there's a secret sauce to getting them in touch, but it does take some time to culture that relationship long term, and that's what I'm really good at. I have the cell numbers for every buyer, right? That way I can just send them a text and you create that relationship. But I'm not the perfect guy when it says which banks to sign and not sign.
For the independents, it's tough because every bank is different as far as how they feel about independence, which I think I'm sure it's very frustrating. When I had this internal argument a couple of years ago, we used to make the independents prepay, and then I finally won the argument that Arthur's store is probably a lot less of a credit risk than your average Mitsubishi store that just popped up yesterday. And I think it's the same with banks. So there's just independents are still fighting against what is a perception that's not real, right? At this point, if you're running a successful independent dealership, you know what you're doing. But it really is about, I think, just boot time and FaceTime and talking to these, credit unions until you wear them down. I wish I had a better answer, but that's the reality.